So you want to own a machine that turns water and soap into a monthly subscription. No inventory. No spoilage. No returns. A car goes in dirty. A car comes out clean. Somewhere between those two states, money appears. Here's the paradox. The simpler the business looks, the more capital it swallows before it pays you back. Wall Street spent the last 5 years treating this industry like a printing press. Then the printing press started eating the people who owned it. A machine that cannot lose money just quietly bankrupted some of the sharpest operators in American retail. Stick around. We're going to find out how. Because on paper, this industry has no right to fail. Nearly 300 million registered vehicles in the United States. A product that degrades the moment you drive it off the lot. A service people will pay for monthly without ever thinking about it, the same way they don't think about their phone bill. Recurring revenue, low headcount, near zero shrinkage. Every private equity analyst who ever ran the numbers came away convinced this was the closest thing to a vending machine the size of a building. They were half right. Tier 1. Bootstrapped. A single self-serve bay, 4 wands, a coin box. Real estate lease, second-hand equipment, a water reclaim system to keep the county happy. $60,000 to build. Maybe $90,000 with a vacuum island bolted on. You are the manager, the mechanic, and the guy fishing quarters out of a jammed machine at midnight. Tier 2. Regional. This is the express tunnel, 90 seconds, conveyor belt, a membership app instead of a cash box. Site acquisition, tunnel construction, arches, dryers, the reclaim tank, permitting. $4 to $6 million before a single car rolls through. This is where most operators actually live. This is where most operators actually die. Tier 3. Institutional. Private equity doesn't buy one wash. It buys 40, then acquires the guy who owns 40 more, then borrows against all of them at once. Platform valuations here run past $300 million, stitched together from term loans, sale leasebacks, and growth equity checks written by funds that have never once stood inside a tunnel bay. The spreadsheet is the product. The water is incidental. At every tier, the entry price is really a bet on the same 3 variables. Traffic count on the road out front, the number of tunnels already built within a 3-mile ring, and how cheaply you can borrow to build the next one. Nail all 3 and the unit economics look almost unfair. Miss one, and you've built an expensive concrete tube that a competitor's shadow falls across every afternoon at rush hour. Here's the mechanism, and it isn't washing cars. It's the unlimited club. Picture a gym membership, except the gym is 90 seconds long and the equipment does the sweating for you. A customer pays $30 a month whether they show up once or 30 times. Most show up twice. That gap between what they pay and what they use is the entire business model. Insiders call it the ramp, the 24 to 36-month runway a new site needs to convert one-time washers into subscribers before it breaks even. Get the ramp wrong and you're financing an empty building with somebody else's money. Get it right and a location that cost $5 million throws off $1 million a year in cash, forever, for the cost of electricity and soap. The counterintuitive fact, more competitors sometimes helps you. A second wash on the same road can grow the total pool of subscribers instead of splitting it, because most drivers were never washing their car anywhere at all. But there's a ceiling. Cross it, and the next tunnel built 2 miles down the same corridor doesn't find new customers. It just steals yours. The industry has a name for that too. Cannibalization. And in the last 5 years, operators built themselves straight into it. There's a second insider metric worth knowing, vintage decay. Track a chain's locations by the year they opened, and in a healthy market each new vintage should outperform the last, better sites, sharper marketing, smarter pricing. In an overbuilt market, vintage decay runs backward. Each successive class of new stores underperforms the class before it, because the good corners were already taken and the marginal site was only built to hit a growth target somebody promised to a lender. Watch vintage decay closely enough and you can see a bankruptcy filing 2 years before the company itself notices one. Now look at the building itself, because nothing about it is accidental. The arch out front isn't decoration. It's a billboard sized to be read at 45 miles an hour, engineered to interrupt a commute with a single flash of color and a price tag. Inside the tunnel, the conveyor moves you forward at a fixed pace. You cannot linger, cannot inspect, cannot change your mind halfway through. The vacuum stalls at the exit aren't a courtesy. They're the last 5 minutes you spend on the property, which is exactly when the app pushes you to upgrade your plan. The hidden cost sits underground. A reclaim system that filters and reuses thousands of gallons a day, a grease trap, a chemical injection rig calibrated to the cent per car, all regulatory infrastructure invisible to the customer and non-negotiable to the county. Miss a permit renewal or fail a water discharge test and the 90-second machine stops instantly, while the mortgage on the building keeps running regardless. Even the pricing board is a piece of engineering. 3 tiers, always 3, top one deliberately overpriced so the middle option feels like the obvious, reasonable choice. Nobody buys the top wash. It exists purely to make the second one look cheap. That's not an accident of signage. That's a psychologist's trick wearing a hand-painted price sign. Here's the balance sheet nobody puts in the pitch deck. Payroll, water, electricity, and chemical costs are stable. Real estate and debt service are not, and debt service is what actually kills these businesses. Case 1. A private equity-backed chain grew from under 200 locations to 260 through rapid acquisition, financed almost entirely with floating-rate debt and sale-leaseback deals, leases where the operator sells its own real estate to fund growth, then rents it back at rates that climb every year. When interest rates spiked past 14%, the math that worked at 0% stopped working entirely. The company filed for Chapter 11 with over $600 million in debt and roughly $1 million in cash. Lenders took the equity. The founders took nothing. Case 2 isn't a debt story. It's a fit story. One of the country's largest multi-brand auto services companies spent years building a national car wash arm alongside its other franchise chains, then simply walked away, selling the entire division for under $400 million to a competitor. The washes weren't unprofitable. They just didn't behave like the rest of the portfolio, different labor model, different capital cycle, different customer relationship. And a company built to franchise oil changes couldn't operate water infrastructure at the same rhythm. Sometimes the failure isn't leverage. It's owning the wrong asset inside the wrong company. Neither company ran out of customers. Both ran out of structural fit, one between debt and interest rates, the other between an asset and the organization holding it. That's the part the pitch decks never model. A car wash doesn't need a bad year to fail. It just needs to be financed by the wrong instrument, or owned by the wrong parent, at the wrong moment in a cycle nobody controls. Strip away the arches and the vacuum islands and you're left with one equation: recurring revenue minus fixed debt service equals who survives the next rate cycle. Net margins on a well-run express tunnel land between 20 and 25%, genuinely excellent, on paper identical to software. Mr. Car Wash scaled past both the debt collapses and the divestitures around it and is now the largest chain in the country, because it grew on equity discipline instead of maximum leverage. Everyone else discovered the same lesson the hard way, that a business can have a perfect customer, a perfect margin, and a perfect building, and still be destroyed by a single line item nobody drew on the blueprint, the interest rate on the loan that built it. The car wash was never a business about clean cars. It was a business about who could borrow the cheapest money for the longest time, and the moment the cost of that money changed, the machine that couldn't lose started losing spectacularly, for everyone who mistook a subscription for a sure thing.